Welcome back to the Emily Show at its new permanent time on Mondays, living on the Quick Bits YouTube channel and on your favorite audio podcast feed under the Emily Show. As you have seen from the title of today's episode, we have to talk about this Blake Lively filing because it's not exactly a lawsuit. We're going to go beyond the headlines and talk about what is going on with what seems to be imminent litigation surrounding the movie set of It Ends With Us, which came out in August of 2024 between Blake Lively and lots of others. You may have heard about this movie. You may have heard about drama surrounding the release and premieres of this movie, and was the director and lead actor not in photos with Blake Lively and other cast members, and were there two separate press tours, and why, and who was following who on social media? We're going to get into the lawsuit that has a lot to do with all of that. And then I'm going to speed run the topics that I was going to get to today that got kind of pushed to the back because this story is what I've been getting asked about absolutely the most across social media, so we should just get into it. I'm legal analyst Emily D. Baker. This is the Quick Bits, where I break down just the main points of the pop culture and entertainment cases I'm currently covering on YouTube and the Emily Show podcast. Let's get into it. Before we dive all the way in, two things. First of all, for all of you that are new to finding me, hi, I'm Emily D. Baker. I've been a lawyer for, oh my God, it's going to be 20 years in 2025. That hurts my heart just a little bit, but also, with age comes experience, hopefully. What I do in the Emily Show podcast and across all of my social media when I break down legal filings and break down lawsuits is take a look at what is being alleged, always keeping in mind that lawsuits are allegations and shade. That is most particularly true in civil litigations. And then ask questions about the complaint, the answer, talk about the possible strategy and the paths forward for any given litigation, what the litigation might tell us about other things that are going on, and what is unknown. In any given litigation, when we get to a complaint, there is much that is unknown. It is the beginning of a very long process. What I love about covering courts, legal filings, and then watching and commenting on live trials is taking the legal side and demystifying it so that you can understand it, but also going beyond the headlines that may not give the full picture of what's happening on the legal side. They may give a fuller picture of what's happening more broadly, but not always what the legal side is, what it means, the processes behind it. I love covering law because there is a process, and that process is, though not perfect, it is clear and defined. So we know this is a complaint. This is not a lawsuit yet, and we're going to talk about that. There will be answers in court, and this process will likely take quite a bit of time. It would surprise me very much if this settled quickly, but this will likely take a lot of time, and we will see what happens as it plays out over that amount of time. Because lawsuits are allegations and shade, we will talk about what's going on here and what is in this suit, because there are some notable things in this lawsuit that we do not see in all civil litigations, especially at this very early part. So that is a little bit about how I approach things and how we take a look at it. And one of my goals in all lawsuits is to keep an open mind until we get to the end of the thing. So my goal is to learn what we can, know what we don't know yet, ask questions, and keep an open mind to see how things play out, because again, it's a long process. 2, because there is clearly not going to be a calm in December, don't forget to download the Law Nerd app at lawnerd.app.com so you can stay in the loop. I built it for you so you can check into the coverage of the cases that you care about most, pass on the ones that you're just not interested in, and that's also why I timestamp all of our episodes on YouTube so you can do the same thing. Hey, I want to hear about this, don't want to hear about that. You can just jump to the cases that you care about most. I, at the moment, care about way too many. And I had a bunch of other ones lined up for today, but we're going to speed run them instead. Speed run number 1, Tom Girardi was supposed to be sentenced on Friday, December 20th. Guess what? That didn't happen. Am I bummed? A little bit. Why didn't it happen? It got delayed because he is going to be evaluated for, if he is in custody, what is the appropriate custodial situation for him? Is it more appropriate that he is in a care facility versus a prison custodial setting. And there is going to be evaluations done of him, and there is going to be more filing, and they are going to come back to court to pick future dates. So this is going to be a while yet until Tom Girardi gets sentenced. But the government is asking for 14 years prison, some custodial time's appropriate in this case. So that is probably why this is top of everyone's mind is, well, if he does get sentenced to prison, where would he serve that time? Second, I have talked about it some, but that Tuah, hawk coin, hawking crypto situation. Yes, there's litigation now. No, the influencer or Haley Welch, the Tuah girls, not being sued. It looks like there was much conversation with lawyers to try to go after the individuals that brought her into this project. I will break that down in other content another day, but that's what I was curious about when I first covered this story, if she would be on the side of her community or if she would be getting sued directly. There's a lot going on there. It's for another day. Finally, the Jay-Z, Tony Buzbee, Jay-Z being in the lawsuit with Diddy situation is not slowing down. Jay-Z, through his attorneys, have asked for sanctions. Tony Buzbee has responded with snark and spice, saying this is all ridiculous and how dare you. That's a very, very superficial summary. Again, it's unlikely that there will be a ton of movement on this over the holidays. And if there is, I will keep you up to date in the Law Nerd app because I am not going to be on socials a lot over the holidays. I want to make some Christmas cookies, hang out with my family, and play Mario Kart and Animal Crossing and read. I promised you on the last live stream that there was some reading I needed to do over the break, and that is still happening. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's from the live stream Thursday last week. Let's get into it ends with litigation. At the beginning of this, I said this Blake Lively complaint is not a lawsuit yet. What do I mean by that? Well, it's not a lawsuit yet. This has not been filed. This looks like it's contemplating being filed in the Los Angeles County Superior Court. It is not filed there yet. When you take a look at the face sheet of this lawsuit, it doesn't have any of the filing stamps across the top that indicate when and what court it was filed in and what the case number is. None of that has been done yet. So if I call this a suit, it is my brain defaulting. This is a complaint. What do we know about this complaint? Well, this complaint was published by the New York Times. It seems that it also was in the hands of TMZ before it all went public. Is it unusual that outlets have lawsuits or complaints or filings before they go public? No. We saw this a ton with everything going on with the Britney Spears conservatorship, that there were so many filings that hadn't even hit the public docket yet that were already in the hands of media outlets. Why? Well, lawsuits can be very effective when journalists who are friendly have them and know what they are about. It seems, based on an article by the New York Times, that the New York Times had access to this complaint, that they had access to a lot of the discovery that's been done. Yes, discovery has been done. And they understood the context of what this filing was and described it in their article. I'm glad that they did because it gave me some context too. If you're not looking for that information, it gets kind of buried in the New York Times article when they're talking about text messages back and forth. We'll get into those. What we know about this filing from Blake Lively: this is positioned as a complaint. This will likely be filed in court in substantially the same format down the road. Not just yet. This is Blake Lively against Wayfarer Studios, LLC, which is the studio that made It Ends With Us, the movie that this is all centered around. The rights to the Colleen Hoover book were owned by Justin Baldoni, who is a co-founder of Wayfarer Studios. This also names Jamie Heath, Steve Sarowitz, who are also involved in Wayfarer Studios, Melissa Nathan, and the agency group PR, who are on the PR side of this, Jennifer Abel, also on the PR side of this, RWA Communications, LLC, Jed Wallace, and Street Relations, Inc. That is everyone who is named as defendants in this complaint. But I said this wasn't a lawsuit. So what is it? This was filed in the California Civil Rights Department. And here's why. Before you can sue for workplace discrimination, you need either to go through the CCRD's process to have them investigate and then sue, or you need a right to sue letter, which means I'm telling you that I'm suing over workplace discrimination. I would like you to let me sue, and I don't need you to investigate it. So can we just get a right to sue letter? And then in lawsuits regarding workplace discrimination, harassment, etc., you will see generally a note at the end of the lawsuit that a right to sue letter was obtained because there is a process for bringing these cases. We have seen this in cases I've covered, particularly with the Blizzard Activision case and with Riot Games. So we have talked about it in those contexts because it goes through that investigation first. And in the Blizzard Activision lawsuit, there was a full investigation from the CCRD before the civil filing was made. That can happen. Or you can just get the right to sue letter and then go directly to litigation. I don't know which path this will take yet, but I'm imagining the fact that the New York Times has put out this article, the fact that the New York Times already has discovery, and the fact that this complaint is written as a lawsuit ready to be filed, that it will probably go the path of the right to sue letter, not the investigation, but it might. So if we don't see this on the public docket relatively soon, then we know that this is probably going through a full CCRD investigation and not going to court just yet, because once you have a right to sue letter, you still have a year to bring the lawsuit, and you don't lose that time if you start the investigation process with the CCRD. So there were some options on how this could go, but if it goes through the investigation route, that is an administrative investigation, yes, a lawsuit can still happen after that is complete, but we won't see public filings, public answers, and public responses on a public court docket the way we would with a lawsuit that was filed in the traditional fashion that we are used to covering it. It's filed, it's docketed, it gets assigned to a court, and then all the litigation pops off like we're seeing in other cases I'm covering. I've gotten a lot of questions from you in the lounge area of the app asking, A, why not sue earlier? And B, how are there text messages in this lawsuit? And the answer to both of those questions is connected because there were subpoenas that went out before this complaint was brought to light. So the subpoena process, as the New York Times said, brought forward thousands of documents. So somebody at the law firm or some buddies at the law firm went through thousands of pages of documents to get their picture of what was happening here before they brought the complaint. And that takes A, a lot of time, and B, process to go and get a subpoena without a standing lawsuit yet to do pre-litigation investigation. I just recently covered the Drake cases, and all of those are also pre-filing or pre-litigation investigation where they are asking for subpoenas and discovery and depositions before they file the lawsuit. And that is not uncommon in a situation where it's like, I know something, but I don't know everything, and I need more information before I can even fashion a complaint to tell you what's going on because I just don't have enough information. And you need a, say it with me in your best Elle Woods, reasonable belief that your complaint has like evidentiary support. So the subpoena process and then intaking thousands of pages of documents and then going through them and forming them into a lawsuit takes time. I also don't think this is a substantial amount of time. The movie was released on August 9th and the press junket was going on in August, September, and all of this started to turn in August. So from August to December is not a long time for lawyers to put together a suit like this, especially considering the subpoenas that went out beforehand. So as we get into this, I'm going to cover really the process of what's being alleged here. We've talked about the process of how this goes forward and the responses to this, because we've already seen responses from the author of the book series, Colleen Hoover, who's also a producer on the film and was also on set at times for this film. I don't know if she was on set day in and day out, but she was on set at times during this filming and has made somewhat of a statement. We've also seen statements from Baldoni's lawyers. So we're going to go through all of that. So as we look at this complaint, we see that the intended causes of action are actually 10 separate causes of action for sexual harassment, retaliation, failure to investigate, prevent, and or remedy harassment, retaliation under a different code section, aiding and abetting harassment and retaliation, breach of contract, IIED or intentional infliction of emotional distress, false light invasion of privacy, which goes kind of hand in hand with the IIED, negligence, and interference with prospective economic advantage. This is an 81-page filing because it includes the complaint and then it includes attachments. What the headlines have been calling this is a complaint for sexual harassment and a social media campaign. The complaint actually goes pretty far beyond that. And the heart of what's being alleged here, in a very brief summation, is that there were concerns on the movie set, and Blake Lively brought those concerns to the production company, Wayfair Studios. That includes Justin Baldoni, who was the director of the movie, one of the producers of the movie, the co-owner of the studio, and the opposite of Blake Lively and one of the lead actors in the movie. So he is involved at all levels in it. So not only is he responsible for his own behavior, but responsible for remedying his behavior because his company is the studio and the production company that's in charge of all of this. Sony Pictures was the distribution house of this film, and they are not named in any of this because, again, they were distributing the film. They were not in charge of making the film. That was Wayfarer Studios, who owns the rights to not just It Ends With Us, but also the sequel to that, It Starts With Us. What is alleged is that Blake Lively brought to the studios, the production team, concerns about sexual harassment on set, concerns about behavior on set, and concerns about how she was being treated on set. And she highlights those throughout this complaint, which I am going to link below so you can go read it if you want to read the entire complaint for yourself. We are going to take a look at the remedies that were put down in writing after an HR meeting happened regarding concerns on set before the movie resumed filming. The movie stopped filming because there was a writer's strike and a SAG strike going on in Hollywood that halted production of this film. And then these HR concerns were addressed in a meeting before filming resumed. And at that meeting was, per the first page of the lawsuit, Justin Baldoni, who's the co-chairman and co-founder of Wayfarer Studios, as well as the director, executive producer, and actor in the lead role. Jamie Heath, who is the CEO of Wayfarer and a producer of the film. Ange Giannotti, the film's representative for its distributor, Sony Pictures. Alex Sachs, a producer of the film. Todd Black, a producer of the film. Blake Lively, who was one of the leads in the film. And Lively's representative in this meeting was also present, and that was her husband. And the lawsuit says that her husband was her representative, given that the meeting was about repeated sexual harassment and other disturbing behavior by Baldoni and Heath. So the underlying issue here is the allegations of sexual harassment on set. And then the retaliation allegations are that she brought the sexual harassment to light. And as the film was getting released and all the press was happening ahead of it, those on social media started noticing that there seemed to be almost two very separate press efforts happening. And that with those separate press efforts, Baldoni was not with the rest of the cast, was not with Blake Lively. They were not in photos together, and none of the cast followed him on social media. Colleen Hoover, the author of the book, had followed him on social media and no longer followed him on social media. That Ryan Reynolds didn't follow him, Blake Lively didn't follow him. And so the internet was like, hey, this is kind of weird that the lead actor, director, producer of the film isn't with anybody else from the film and isn't being followed on social media. The lawsuit alleges that he and the studio and others then went on a social media campaign and a crisis PR campaign to discredit Blake Lively. So it goes a bit beyond damaging her reputation, because it's not just a, retaliation campaign, we're going to damage her reputation. Based on the allegations here, they are crafting a picture from their perspective that the negative press campaign was to discredit Blake Lively to the point that if the HR issues on set came to light, she wouldn't be believed about them. And so the documents that they attach, the text messages that they attach, are attached as the lawsuit paints that picture of retaliation in the workplace in a new way. We, of course, have seen retaliation in the workplace in things I've covered here. You have probably seen it in your life where somebody at work is the one that is like, hey, what's happening here? And then all of a sudden they're fired. That is illegal. That is retaliation. All of the states have laws against retaliating when somebody brings something to light in the workplace. But we also know that Hollywood can be a very unforgiving workplace. And when people bring complaints to light, they can very quickly find themselves on the outside of Hollywood. So this lawsuit attaches the discovery that they have procured, including the document from HR that we're going to look at, the crisis PR document that they obtained from Wayfarer Studios and their crisis PR team. It also includes additional riders to the contract that were added after this meeting, which included that there would be no retaliation against Blake Lively for bringing issues to the forefront. Let's take a look at what the allegations of HR issues are, as these are connected in the lawsuit. And look, there are so many people at this meeting. If this goes to trial, which would be a very long way down the road, but more likely when it goes to deposition, there's a lot of people involved here. So things like HR meetings are going to be pretty easy to prove or disprove because it's all documented. And that's one of the things about a workplace and then having this pre-litigation discovery is that it is all documented. The very first exhibit we're going to look at, Exhibit A from this, is a letter between attorneys and the production group. This is from November 9th, 2023, from Lindsay Strasberg, ESQ, saying to the individuals this is addressed to, with the tentative resolution of the SAG-AFTRA strike, we are writing to address how to handle a return to the set of It Ends With Us. It is no surprise to the film's producers that the experience of shooting the film has been deeply concerning on many levels. The complaints of our client and others have been repeatedly conveyed and well documented throughout pre-production and photography. While we reserve all legal rights, at this stage our client is willing to forego a more formal HR process in favor of everyone returning to work and finishing the film as long as the set is safe moving forward. It goes on to say, in order for our client to feel safe returning to the production, we are attaching a list of protections that would need to be guaranteed and observed by the film's producers. If the production is unwilling to accept or uphold these protections, our client is prepared to pursue her full legal rights and remedies. And that would be a, hey, this is a breach of contract, so now what? Which would have brought all of production to a halt, I would imagine. It goes on to say this letter is not intended to constitute a full statement of all facts and circumstances relating to this matter. It is not intended to be, nor should it be construed as a waiver, release, or relinquishment of any of our clients' rights or remedies, legal or equitable, all of which are hereby expressly reserved. Lawyers. And then we have the protections for return to production that are being requested. And this is what was discussed during the HR meeting that is discussed at the very beginning of this complaint. And it says, in order for Blake Lively, who's referred to as BL throughout, to be able to return to production on film, each of the following protections must be agreed to in writing. An intimacy coordinator be present at all times when Blake Lively is on set. And when we get through the HR notes, it seems that this is more specifically tailored to when there are intimate scenes on set happening. There must be a closed set during the rehearsal and filming of any scene involving simulated sex or nudity, or any observation via remote monitor shall be restricted to essential personnel and approved by Blake Lively, as further described in a fully negotiated, fully executed, SAG-compliant nudity rider, that is referred to as the nudity rider. There is to be no spontaneous improvising of any scenes, including physical touching, simulated sex or nudity, scenes involving kissing, depictions of sexual intercourse, or other physical touching must be contained in the screenplay as approved, choreographed in advance in the presence of the intimacy coordinator, and may only proceed as choreographed with the consent of all parties in advance. Physical touching and or comments on Blake Lively's appearance must only be done or made in connection with the character and scene work, not to Blake personally, except as written in the screenplay or as strictly required in connection with makeup or costume preparation. There is to be no physical touching, including hugging, of Blake Lively, her on-set personnel, or her employees. There are to be no discussions of personal experience with sex or nudity, including as it relates to conduct with spouses or others. No one will enter or attempt to enter, interrupt, pressure, or request entrance to Blake Lively's trailer while she is in a state of undress for any reason. And early on in this complaint, there are allegations that while Lively was trying to breastfeed, that both Baldoni and Heath would come into her trailer without permission while she was uncovered because She was 4 months postpartum while filming this and was still nursing. So part of while she was undressed for any reason included breastfeeding, but it also included having body makeup put on or taken off for various scenes in the movie, and that people would just come in and try to have conversations with her while makeup was doing body makeup. So that's early on in the complaint. And these are being distilled to writing because of, as the complaint says, the concerns that it happened. And they line that out in quite a lot of detail in the complaint. It says there shall be no retaliation of any kind against BL for raising concerns about the conduct described in this letter or for those requirements, any changes in attitude, sarcasm, marginalization, or other negative behavior, either on set or otherwise, including during publicity and promotional work as a result of these requests, is retaliatory and unacceptable and will be met with immediate action. The final point they make is a request to hold an all-hands in-person meeting before production resumes, which will include the director, all producers, the Sony representative, the newly engaged third-party producer, Lively's designated representative, to confirm or approve a plan for implementation of the above and to adhere to that for the physical and emotional safety of Lively, her employees, and all cast and crew moving forward. Once the complaint lays out the underlying allegations of what was going on set, the HR meetings that had taken place, they then start talking about the retaliation afterwards. They say that leading up to and connection with the release of the film during the summer of 2024, Lively and fellow cast promoted the film in accordance with the marketing plan created and delivered by the film's distributor, Sony, which is summarized in the talking points attached. So if you are curious about what the marketing plan was for this film, they attached it as an exhibit. It's linked. It says Miss Lively and other cast were under contractual obligation to render promotional services in accordance with the marketing plan, and the marketing plan directed cast to, quote, focus more on Lily, the main character's strength and resilience, as opposed to describing the film as a story about domestic violence, and to, quote, avoid talking about this film that makes it feel sad or heavy. It's a story of hope. So the marketing plan around this film seemed to be what a lot of people had issue with and attributed to Lively. They are saying here that the marketing plan from Sony, the distributor, was to focus on this film as a story of hope and resilience, not to focus on the very real heaviness of the topic of the film about domestic violence. They go on to allege that in the days leading up to the film's release, Baldoni abruptly pivoted away from the film's marketing plan and the types of publicity activities in which he had previously participated. What the public did not know was that Mr. Baldoni and his team did so in an effort to explain why many of the film's cast and crew had unfollowed him on social media and were not appearing with him in public. It goes on to say what the public did not know was that this was the beginning of a multi-tiered plan that Mr. Baldoni and his team described as, quote, social manipulation designed to, quote, destroy Miss Lively's reputation. The plan was backed by virtually unlimited resources. Wayfair's co-founder, co-chairman, and leading financier is multi-billionaire Steve Sarowitz, who divulged at the film's New York premiere on August 6, 2024, that he was prepared to spend $100 million to ruin the lives of Miss Lively and her family. I really want to know where that came from. Was that a comment made to third parties? Was that made in an interview? I have so many questions about that. The complaint goes on to say, with that backing, Baldoni and Wayfair Associates embarked on a sophisticated press and digital plan in retaliation for Miss Lively exercising her legally protected right to speak up about their misconduct on set, with the additional objective of intimidating her and anyone else from revealing what had actually occurred. And the rest of the complaint really goes through what that is, including based on text messages that they have. The complaint says on August 2nd, 2024, TAG created a scenario planning document for Mr. Baldoni, Mr. Heath, and others, which described preparations and strategy, quote, should Miss Lively and her team make her grievances public. And that is also attached. If you want to look at that entire crisis planning doc, yes, it mentions Taylor Swift. That part of the headlines is completely accurate. And if you're now thinking, Emily, what do you mean it mentions? We'll get there. It goes on to say, to get ahead of this narrative, the PR agent's plan proposed strategies to advance misleading counter-narratives, including pushing the narrative that Lively had a, quote, less than favorable reputation, proposing to explore planting stories about the weaponization of feminism, and misleadingly blaming Lively for production members losing their jobs. The weaponizing of feminism is where Taylor Swift gets mentioned in that entire document. Then the lawsuit attaches a screenshot of this text message between Baldoni and someone else. And these text messages all seem to come from the company that was subpoenaed, not from Baldoni, based on the way that Baldoni is in gray and the other bubbles are in blue. So I think all of those subpoenas probably went to the PR companies. And the text that purports to be from Justin Baldoni says, "Morning, not in love with the document they sent, not sure I'm feeling the protection I felt on the call. The response is, this is the first time I've personally gone through scenario planning with them. So I think let's let them discuss the thinking behind the document and the actual process and protocol of how they implement these things. That's the most important part of this, is how quickly they can shut things down and place stories in your favor. Be honest on this call and let's give real feedback to each point." And the response is, yeah, it feels very much like there is not much defense, and also them feeling strong like she's going to do something, just a bit concerning what everyone had originally thought. They then go through to talk about later that day other text messages. These are coming from February 8th. This is the day before the public release of the movie, and these all look like they are coming from a Celebrate cell phone dump based on the way that they are laid out, not from screenshots. It says Miss Abel and Miss Nathan, who are both in PR, exchanged the following text messages expressing that, quote, Mr. Baldoni, quote, wants to feel like Miss Lively can be buried. Miss Abel and Miss Nathan agreed that, of course, they would do just that, but they couldn't say so in writing. Quote, we can't write it down to him. We can't write, we will destroy her. Imagine if a document saying all the things he wants ends up in the wrong hands. Or in a lawsuit. Or in the New York Times. And so they have those text message downloads saying, you can of course do that, but I do think he needs to know. I'm going to confidentially send you something. He's texting me and Jamie on the side just to arm you before the call. I think you guys need to be tough and show the strength of what you guys can do in these scenarios. He wants to feel like she can be buried. It goes on to say, of course, but you know, when we send over docs, we can't send over the work we will or could do because that could get us in a lot of trouble. We can't write it down. We can't write, we will destroy her. I mean, it's in a text message. It's written now. We will go to this. We will do this. We will do this. We will do this. It then says he has to look at it as an information document for us to be armed with. That's all. Imagine if a document saying all the things he wants ends up in the wrong hands. And then they go on to line out an extensive amount of text messages, including one that has a headline from the Daily Mail. The headline saying, is Blake Lively set to be canceled? A string of hard-to-watch videos that have surfaced following tone-deaf Q&A to promote It Ends With Us could tarnish 36-year-old star's golden Hollywood image for good. And the text messages related to that between members of the PR team have a link to the article, and then wow, and then you really outdid yourself with this piece, and then that's why you hired me, right? I'm the best. And then they start to go through what was going on leading up to the film's release, saying in June 2024, a month after Baldoni's first promotional event for the film, Lively and others in the cast fulfilled their first publicity obligation for the film without him. They did not publicly discuss the misconduct that had occurred on set, nor did they ever suggest to Wayfarer or Mr. Baldoni that they intended to discuss their concerns publicly. Yet, on June 20th, 2024, Ms. Abel texted Mr. Heath her concern, quote, we can't have fans starting to guess why JB is left out of this stuff. It goes on to say, likewise, Baldoni strategized with his publicist, Ms. Abel, about various ways in which they might cover up or explain away his on-set misconduct. On June 24th, 2024, for example, he proposed an, quote, offensive move showing his neurodivergence and some of the attributes that come with it to explain that, quote, anything that he had been accused of was social awkwardness and impulsive speech. And then they link some of the articles where he starts talking about a very recent diagnosis with ADHD, which seems to be part of his PR strategy to deny things that happened on set by saying that it was just ADHD. So not only are we looking at a plan to go after Blake Lively's credibility, but they're alleging a plan to further insulate himself from critique or criticism should these things come to light. Nowhere in this document, and when this is filed and there's a answer, maybe we will see it, but nowhere in this document is the how do we convey that the allegations on set aren't true. It was all in the way that they are presenting this. How do we explain things so they don't seem as bad? And one of the text messages supporting that from June 24th, 2024 is, "Hey guys, one thing I think I want to do is the Dr. Amen show. Matt, I know you have your feelings about it, but his practice saved my friend Miranda's life a few months ago. With everything going on, I want to have an offensive move showing my neurodivergence and that some of the attributes that come with it so that I can start talking about it. Most anything that I have been quote unquote accused of is social awkwardness and impulsive speech. And I think me sitting down with him and just looking at my brain and talking about some of those things will be helpful for me." It goes on to say on July 24th, Abel emailed Heath and others requesting the legal letter sent to Miss Lively and her team stating, quote, "Per our conversation, we will go through point by point and draft context surrounding each situation." And draft context. So go through the complaint and draft the context. We can flag what we are missing that would be helpful to arm us in case we need to refute any of the claims. The complaint then goes through in more detail and using more text messages and seemingly some emails from a Celebrate cell phone extraction, the process of seeding friendly media and giving them the quote unquote true story or the behind the scenes or the context, and then working with that media to make sure they weren't picking up stories about it being uncomfortable on set, stories that there were multiple complaints to HR, not just from Blake Lively and others, and making sure that those stories weren't picked up. At one point, the complaint alleges that PR said the quote unquote like big four publishing was all standing down on allegations of HR complaints on set. So this wasn't just going after Blake Lively's reputation, but also making sure that any of the stories about complaints made on set by her or others were suppressed. The end of this, before we get to the attachments, explains why they are bringing this complaint. And based on this explanation, I think we will see it go forward into a lawsuit once they end up with the right to sue letter, which probably won't take all that long, except for holidays. They say, quote, "Miss Lively never sought out conflict with Wayfarer, Mr. Baldoni, or Mr. Heath, but instead consistently attempted to speak up for a safe and respectful workplace privately in hopes of protecting herself as well as the cast and crew without jeopardizing a film that she believed could make a difference in people's lives. In response, Mr. Baldoni, Mr. Heath, and those working for them sought to destroy Miss Lively and anyone else who knew the truth. Miss Lively's discovery of the full extent of the retaliatory campaign launched by Wayfarer parties has left her with no choice. Through this complaint, Miss Lively seeks to set the record straight, to hold Wayfarer parties and associates accountable, and to shine a light on this new form of retaliation so that it will not be used against any others who seek to stand up and speak out against sexual harassment." And then they attach the crisis PR outline that they received as part of that subpoena. This is the "it ends with us" scenario planning, and it lists out the objective as protect the reputation of Jason Baldoni, Jamie Heath, and Wayfarer Studios in the lead up, during, and following the premiere of It Ends With Us, underscore the achievement and efforts of the Wayfarer team to bring this movie to life, and emphasize Justin and the studio's commitment to their team and making the broader industry a more inclusive space. And then they go through the overview of the scenarios. They talk about the crisis mitigation and rapid response, and then they talk about the preparation materials that they want and the key messaging points. They then go through the if-then plan of action. Scenario 1, Blake and her team push out negative stories regarding Justin or Wayfarer post-premiere. And then they talk about, depending on the scope, how they would respond to that, how they should respond to that, and how they need to be seating the friendly reporters so that they can play story with them so that they've got them, quote, teed up properly. And they say directly, quote, "An idea for this and working alongside Jen is giving a friendly reporter who is covering the film a simple line, hinting that while you and Blake don't always agree, at times, quote, had our differences, you have respect for her. This way, if Blake Lively's stories are softer, we don't look so aggressive. If it's a hit piece, then we've teed up reporters properly that there were issues with her. We would also ensure that the story is broader about the film, inspiration, etc., so that the line is one part of a larger piece. They say scenario 2, Blake subtly hints at her, quote, experience in post-premiere coverage, either in an interview, op-ed, or otherwise. And then they talk about whether or not she would pepper in Easter eggs alluding to what had happened on set. And they said that these pieces will likely come out following any potential hit piece and or coverage from the premiere. Our recommended approach would be to provide reporters who reach out for comment, should it be obvious she's referring to you, with the appropriate background information listed in scenario 1 to ensure their stories are balanced and the speculation can be turned to another one of the many people she's had issues working with. And then they list out Leighton Meester, Anna Kendrick, Ben Affleck, etc. Though I thought that she and Anna Kendrick just filmed like a sequel to the movie that they did, but I digress. And then scenario 3 is that Ryan comes forward in defense of his wife. So they are also crisis planning what happens if Ryan Reynolds says something about the film. And that's where they say, as a part of this, our team can explore planting stories about the weaponization of feminism and how people in Blake Lively's circle, like Taylor Swift, have been accused of utilizing these tactics to bully into getting what they want. So with all of that, what comes next? Well, we need to take a look at a few of the responses real quick. So first is an Instagram story post from Colleen Hoover, who added Blake Lively and said, "You have been nothing but honest, kind, supportive, and patient since the day we met. Thank you for being exactly the human that you are. Never change, never wilt." And it's a picture of the two of them hugging in what seems to be a movie theater, presumably, I would imagine, in connection with this film, which I think, given that the author of this book, who sold the rights to this book and its sequel to Wayfarer, is a strong statement. And we have a statement from the attorneys for Wayfarer and Justin Baldoni as well. This is a statement that was given to the New York Times and has been widely reported on, that is coming from attorney Brian Friedman. And if you recognize the name Brian Friedman, it's because he works often and closely with Mark Garrigus, but he has also represented, all of the Bravo lawsuits he has been involved with, including the Bravo reckoning with Bethany Frankel, the Rachel Leviss lawsuit against Tom Sandoval and Ariana Madix. He also represented Jamie Lynn Spears when stuff was going on with her releasing a book, so ended up in some of the filings along with the Britney Spears conservatorship. His statement says, "It is shameful that Miss Lively and her representatives would make such serious and categorically false accusations against Mr. Baldoni, Wayfarer Studios, and its representatives as yet another desperate attempt to, quote, fix her negative reputation, which was garnered from her own remarks and actions during the campaign for the film, interviews, and press activities that were observed publicly in real time and unedited, which allowed the internet to generate their own views and opinions." It goes on to say these claims are completely false, outrageous, and intentionally salacious, with an intent to publicly hurt and rehash a narrative in the media. Wayfarer Studios made the decision to proactively hire a crisis manager prior to the marketing campaign for the film to work alongside with their own representatives, with JonesWorks employed by Stephanie Jones, due to the multiple demands and threats made by Miss Lively during production, which included her threatening to not show up on set, threatening not to promote the film, ultimately leading to its demise during release if her demands were not met. They go on to say it was also discovered that Miss Lively enlisted her own representative, Leslie Sloan, with Vision PR, who also represents Mr. Reynolds, to plant negative and completely fabricated and false stories with the media, even prior to any marketing had commenced for the film, which was another reason why Wayfarer Studios made the decision to hire a crisis professional to commence internal scenario planning in the case they needed to address. The representatives of Wayfarer Studios still did nothing proactive nor retaliatory and only responded to incoming media inquiries to ensure balanced and factual reporting and monitored social activity. It finishes with what is pointedly missing from the cherry-picked correspondence is the evidence that there were no proactive measures taken with media or otherwise, just internal scenario planning and private correspondence to strategize, which is standard operating procedure with public relations professionals. So, given the response from the studio and Baldoni's lawyer, will we see a counterclaim when this all gets filed in court? Maybe. Is this a PR back and forth of a set workplace that went awry, or is it something deeper than that? I'm going to keep an eye on this one. I'm very interested to see what comes out with all of it, because there are things here that will be incredibly well documented, including the HR processes. Sets don't just have a handful of people on them. There are quite a lot of them, and I imagine that the depositions, when this gets that far, will be lengthy, including everyone that was on set. But the allegations from Lively and her team is that this was intentional, so that if she did come forward, one, she wouldn't be believed, and two, her reputation would already be damaged, and it would protect the reputation of Baldoni and Wayfarer. But if this is retaliation for harassment, it is not going to go well in court if that is proven. But if it is proven in court that this campaign was retaliation for reporting harassment in the workplace, it will not likely go well in court. But I imagine this one is going to be a longer one. What was interesting to me is A, the amount of documentation that was had before filing this, and B, that it seemed that part of the concern from Wayfarer and Baldoni was that those on social media were starting to question why no one in the cast and crew was following him, why no one was engaging with him. And it's alleged in this suit that that's where the narrative crafting began, is when people started asking questions and they were going to supply their own answers and direct people away from the complaints that were made on set. We will see what happens in all of this. So with that, thank you for being here. Remember to download the Law Nerd app, and I will be back with you in 2025 here on Mondays and live streaming Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on the Emily D. Baker YouTube channel. If you want to stay in the loop, I've got you. Plus, if you are subscribed on the audio feeds, there will be content for you there over the holiday break that I think you will very much enjoy. So with that, thank you again for being here. Thank you for being a Law Nerd, whether you've been a Law Nerd for quite a while or whether you are new to the Law Nerd community. Say it with me. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being a Law Nerd, and may the odds be ever in your favor. I will see you in the next one. For deep dives into the stories that I covered here, you can find them on my YouTube channel at The Emily D. Baker and The Emily Show podcast. I stream every Tuesday and Thursday. The podcast goes live on Wednesdays. And if you want to stay in the loop with everything I'm doing, receive the fastest notifications out there, and get more Law Nerd community, join me at lawnerdapp.com, our free app for iOS and Android.